2 years as like a dude, go off the books and then boom.
Yeah.
The guest roles were like, he's in the office one day, has to answer a call like he's someone else, and the next day he goes and, meets someone for dinner as this other guy.
Right.
Sounds like you're doing the latter here.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. We were never, our unit never has been, nor to this day is it, a true, like, Fed style undercover, like Jay Dobbins kind of embedding with the Hells Angels kind of undercover, nothing like that. So ours was both covert and overt, right? So sometimes we would be out and about, balaclavas on, doing stuff with the SWAT team, and so that they couldn't recognize our face, but we're still in gear and stuff with them.
All right.
And then other times I was buying dope off dudes, right? And doing the undercover thing, but always guest appearance style. Like I never completely disassociated myself from the agency or left the family and go live in an apartment. I did have an assumed identity that I would use in case you get checked up. And so I had a fake ID that was connected.
Where were you from?
I was from Phoenix.
Come on.
Well, you never want to.
How about somewhere fun?
Nah, you never want to do anything that you don't know, dude. I
know, but I like that fun.
Yeah, but I had to. My persona had to be legit, right? So if I get questions, I can legit answer those questions, because if you get checked, checked, So yeah, so I was the same person essentially that I grew up as.
I have a couple balaclavas in there. We could have done this podcast in that for old time's sake. I wish we thought of that before.
Dude, they're hot. They are hot.
They do get heated for a while. Yeah. Fucking Kurt Metzger came in one with like sunglasses, and after like 5 he's like, fuck, man, I need a White Claw. I can't. It's hot as fuck. How do they wear this shit? I was like, they do missions in this shit, bro, for hours.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But you got to feel like when you put on a balaclava and you're about to go like take some shit down, you got to be feeling pretty.
Oh, dude, there's nothing like the lead up and the execution of hitting a place, especially when you're going after cartel dudes and I don't know, man. It's just you're flipping a switch it's a whole different you.
When was the first time you like did a full blown mission where you were cartelled up?
Dude, I don't know. I can't remember my first one because I've done a lot of them, and some of them are more memorable. I can tell you, like the one mission that sticks out in my mind that when we were doing this was one that I was anticipating getting either shot or blown up on, because of the level of violence of the crew that we were going after. And so they were indiscriminately using violence all the time. The dude we were going after had killed his boss to take that spot. And so he was known to carry grenades on his belt. So he would loop in the pin, right? Or not the pin, but the release handle. So he would loop those on his belt. So he was known to carry grenades, and he always had an AK with him wherever he was, like throughout the house. And we were hitting his house, and he lived in kind of a remote area, as some of those guys do in that area that we showed on the map. So we hiked in about 3 miles to get to his place. So we were under night vision and stuff, and we hiked in all the way to get there. In night vision, yeah.
Is this still the 90s?
This would have been, no, this would have been early 2000s.
Okay. So you're like almost a decade on the job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But we hike in and we hit that house, which all intel was pointing to the fact that he was home and that he had maybe 1 or 2 security guys with him, that they had cameras on the house, all the stuff. And so when we had briefed on it, again, briefed by the same, the dude that pulled me into undercover work, he's my team leader on this one. And he's like, look, man, we're probably going to get in the shooting. As soon as we hit that door, he's either going to go for a grenade or he's going to give us some AK love. And we're going to have to answer that. All right, cool, man. And I was point guy. So he's got me on point as we get up to the house, we get up to the door. And what I found out after the fact is that they had gotten some last minute intel, and he was getting the intel feed and was kind of giving it to us. I was super amped up by the time we walk up to the door, right? And my adrenaline's pumping, and if people don't know this, they probably understand it in some sense. But when your adrenaline rush is just when it's dumped on you like that, auditory exclusion happens, right? That's one of the things where you don't hear. You just whatever. It excludes loud noises, sometimes muffled sounds, all that kind of stuff.
How do you get that under control?
Well, you have to recognize it, and you have to kind of breathe through it and work through it to get it to come back. And it's hard. Like, I don't think you ever truly get it under control. You just try to manage it. But as we got to that door, I heard go, go, go. And I knew that we had to get in there quick, right? So go, go, go for me meant that something changed at the last minute. And so what I was anticipating is they knew we were there. And so kick the door, go in, balls to the wall. As I clear the living room where we anticipated him to be, I figure out that I'm alone. I got one other guy, but he's trailing pretty far behind me. And he gets in. And so I'm like, I'm in this house, and then I'm thinking, shit, the bad guy is not where he's supposed to be, where they told us he was going to be. And so then I'm thinking, shit, the house is rigged to blow. Like they're going to blow the house. And so I turn around, and my buddy's there. He had made it in by that time. And so I'm like, there's no bad guy. And he's like, back of the house, back of the house. And so we go hauling ass to the back of the house thinking, okay, he's still in the back bedroom then. We got one other bedroom to clear. So we go to the bedroom. The house is empty. So then I'm really thinking it's a fucking setup. We got to get out of here, right? And so I'm thinking the house is going to blow. So we haul ass out of the house, only to find out that go, go, go was actually no, no, no. Oh. Bad choice of words, right? So no, no, no to me was go, go, go. So I went. The rest of the team heard what was actually said and held like they were supposed to. I kind of blew the mission and went in like I wasn't supposed to. And so me and one other guy cleared the house. The last minute intel was that they had left like an hour or so earlier. And one of the confidential informants kind of called in to give that info. And so the team leader had figured that out. So he didn't want to burn the house. He just wanted to back off from it. Let's back off. Because at that time, cameras were still like closed circuit, right? So there's not a lot of recording of cameras. It's more of an early warning system.
He's just looking for a better opportunity.
Right, right. So that was one that sticks out to me as one of my first like cartel house hits.
That's some shit.
Yeah, it was
out in the sticks, or
it was pretty
I guess the desert, whatever.
Yeah.
Some fucking covert little house.
It was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. Even though I kind of screwed up at the end there, and I caught plenty of shit about that, but it was still one of those things where I was like, let's go. Let's do this all the time, man.
All right. So, but at this point, though, early 2000s, you're doing missions like this. You're clearly like kind of read in on what's going on in Arizona as it relates to what's happening on the other side of the border and dragging in here. What, obviously drugs are coming in. What was it like, though, at that time? What was the cartel presence like in Arizona? How was it changing from what it previously had been of like, Mexican mafiosos, like you said? Yeah.
So how it had changed was they were, I guess, more overt on the U.S. side. So the guys that were like captain level dudes in their organizations and lieutenant level dudes, you saw them more. They were more involved with activities. So they would be more subject of your investigation. And again, if you look at us comparatively, we're a local sheriff's office in Arizona, right? So if you look at the grand scheme of things on cartel fighting, the feds are at the top tier of that, right? So because they're doing stuff worldwide, DEA, FBI, all them. So they're dealing with them on a whole different level. We're dealing with mid-level to kind of upper management, but there's a certain level that they reach where they don't come on the U.S. side because they have indictments against them, right? Right. And so we're dealing with mainly like lieutenant and captain level guys on our side that we, the sheriff's office, were dealing with at that time. And so you start to see a clear structure and that, oh, that's a dude in charge. And everybody acknowledges that that's the dude in charge. So when you're stopping lower level dudes that either say something by accident or give some type of acknowledgement to what's going on, you can start to see structure and a hierarchy, which looks different than it used to look, because it used to be completely hidden. You just knew that guy's connected to something, but I don't know what. I just know he's connected, right? I know he's some type of boss over something. And now there's a clear hierarchy, and you can kind of see that all happening.
Is there like a clear red point? And what I mean by that is, did you guys have some sort of understanding that if an investigation conducted by the sheriff's office reached a certain level of the hierarchy or whatever, you needed to bring in, whether it be DEA or FBI or all the above? Like, was there an understanding as to where that point was?
Not really. So when you're talking jurisdictions and cases like that, typically what would happen is there's deconfliction, right? So agencies are talking to agencies, or the systems have flags. And so like if I'm a detective at the sheriff's office and I'm like, man, I keep hearing this Julian guy is connected, right? And I run you, and I'm going to start looking at this Julian guy because I keep hearing he's connected, and I run you in this system. Then all of a sudden the system tells me like, hey, somebody else is looking at this case too, or looking at this guy too. And then the system kind of connects the dots, and all of a sudden we start talking, and so it'll say, hey, reach out to DEA agent whoever. And I'm like, all right. So, hey, DEA agent, this dude's in my county. I think he's up to no good. Here's what I suspect. And they'll be like, yeah, there's something bigger here going on, and we need to meet. And so you would get a meeting, and the feds never give you everything, right? But they would say like, hey, we have a bigger case, and he's one piece of the puzzle. And if you take that piece out, it's going to cause some issues for us. So could you leave that piece alone? Or they would do the opposite, and they'd tell you the same thing, but they'd say, have at it, dude. Whatever you want to do with that piece won't affect our overall case, so keep going with it. So that's typically how it went.
What was the border like at that time? Is it, as far as like all the drugs coming in and cartel members coming in back then, I'm thinking early 2000s.
Yeah.
Are they all just coming across the Arizona border, or are they coming over other ways and getting it in other ways?
There was a lot of, so back then, early 2000s, a lot of... we were starting to see the backpacking of loads, where they would have mules essentially transport it through the open desert. We were starting to see that. They would backpack it. That area that I showed you was about a 5 or 6 day hike from Mexico up into our area.
It's like 55 miles, you said?
Yeah, but they would do it over a 5 or 6 day period because they would have to hide during the day, and they would pack at night. So typically during the day they would try not to pack because they're more visible. Border Patrol was out there. So Border Patrol has that whole area under surveillance, right? Whether it be seismic surveillance or aerial or whatever, from the border all the way up sometimes. And they knew that, so they would travel at night mostly. So it would take them some time to get up to our location. Where they would load the dope out. So that was one thing going on. But there was harder drugs like the cocaine and heroin. Typically those were traps. So they could backpack that in sometimes. And when they would get it into the U.S., they would redistribute. So they would break that load up, put it into traps in vehicles, and then those vehicles would transport it up, hidden compartments essentially. Or the other method would be hidden compartment on the south side and cross it over the international border in a hidden compartment and then up to wherever it needed to get to. That was typically for the harder drugs. Marijuana at that time was the cash crop for the Sinaloans all the way up through the like 2013, 14s.
Oh, that late. Wow.
Yeah, it was still their cash crop. It was like the number one thing they were exporting. So marijuana always came up in bulk, and bulk is harder to hide, right? Because at the height of it, like when we're talking in my book, they were moving probably at that time frame, they're probably moving 50 tons a month through.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like they have, when you move weed, I'm going to get the numbers wrong off the top of my head, but just to keep it around here, 50 trucks worth of weed is worth the same amount one truck of coke is worth. It's not like prudent, but it is in demand.
Yep. And again, it's for the Sinaloans, it was their cash crop. They dabbled in heroin and cocaine. That was still there, right? And then they eventually got into meth and then fentanyl. But marijuana was their thing, and it was all. If you look at Narcos, and you had the one guy that weed was his thing, right? And he had the big fields that he had figured out and flying stuff around. And,
Francisco, what the fuck was his name?
I can't remember his name. I never can.
Can we Google that? Narcos Mexico, Joe. I always forget their goddamn names.
Yeah.
The dude with the goatee who was like the original gangster. Felix
Gallardo.
Felix, it was a Gallardo.
I think it was Gallardo.
Yeah. So he was the weed guy, like you said. And the dude underneath him who killed Kiki Camarena, who we just locked up again. The hell was his name?
I know you're...
Kidnapped
exactly.
Kiki?
Yeah.
Which one? Well, I always forget this guy's name on the podcast.
Was it Fonseca?
Yeah. Rafael Caro Quintero.
Yes. Yes. There he is.
So he was like the number 2.
Right.
He loved the weed.
Yeah.
And then Felix was like, we're moving the cocaine.
Yeah. Because again, so if you look back at when those guys started as the mafiosos, there were kind of lines you didn't cross, a lot like the Cosa Nostra, right? So they were like, we're not into the hard drugs, right? We just do this. And so there was all these dynamics that played. Yeah, for sure, dude. They're running the hard drugs.
You know what they're into?
Business. Money. Yeah, right. That's why, people ask about the whole, and it doesn't matter who the presidency or the president is. It just matters about policies. But people ask like, do you ever think we could break the cartels if we went at them hard enough? And I'm like, well, yeah. And, because we were talking about we want to make them narco-terrorists. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, yeah, but it's just going to be like the normal terrorists. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because jihadi terrorists, that's an ideology.
Yeah.
And these guys are driven by money and power.
Yes.
So it's completely different.
Yeah. And they will do the sickest things.
Right.
To fill that in.
Oh, yeah.
My friend Katarina Schultz got so much shit for a report that she was 100% correct about.
Right.
Back in August, September, she had the exclusive on it, and she found out, obviously this is like 7-8 months into the new presidency, so there's a tighter border policy, obviously. Right. So what does that mean? It means there's some income that has to be rehashed or refigured out. And you would think, we'll find some sort of weird drug way to do it. Nope. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel started this racket, whatever you want to call it, of human trafficking, where they would abduct young mothers, take them to trap houses, force C-sections, leave the mothers on the side of the street to die or in the trap house to die, take the baby alive, sometimes maybe cut it up and take, an innocent life's organs. Yeah. And the worst part is give it to men in suits and traffic it across the U.S. border to U.S. buyers. Mm-hmm. And she, when she told me she had this report, obviously I got on the phone with her to be like, all right, what's the sourcing here? This is a huge, huge claim. Right. And I knew she had it. And then we brought her on for episode 336, and everyone gave her shit, and a week later, the fucking U.S. State Department arrested the woman who was running it for them, and it was real. You know what? She was slightly wrong about the price. The price was like a little lower, actually.
Yeah. And that's probably what people stuck on, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, because the value for human life is, and I can tell you, not anything close to that. Well, and maybe it is. In the grand scheme of things, it is. But we had these things in our county and throughout the southwest border, rape trees, right? And so rape trees were essentially trophy trees for smugglers where they would smuggle women, and it is where they rape the women. So these trees became trophy trees for these smugglers. So they raped the women there, and they would take their bras and panties, sometimes bloodied up because of how violent rapes were, and they would throw them up on these, like we have these mesquite trees or Palo Verde trees that have these little thorns, and so when you throw clothes on them, it kind of sticks to the thorns. And so you would be out in the desert and you would see this tree with bras and panties all over it, and you're like, what the fuck? And then you start debriefing some of these people, and you figure out real quick what it is. It's where they're raping the women and leaving it as a trophy of this is the spot where I did that. And I'll give you a story related to We had, and this was when I was still at the sheriff's office, and this was 4 years ago, 5 years ago-ish.
I have to say this, by the way, this is for YouTube. This is for educational purposes from someone who lived in this life as on the law enforcement side, expressing what happened here. We are showing no visuals of what's going on. This is in compliance with YouTube policies under the educational provisions. Sorry, I have to do that.
No,
Please
all good,
continue.
man. I understand. But our air unit, we had a helicopter unit that helped Border Patrol quite a bit on their missions down looking. A lot of times it was rescues, quite honestly. People would, in that hot desert, they would get lost. They would be without water. They would call 911. They would get abandoned by their coyote, and we would have to go rescue them and get them help. And a lot of times they were in a bad way. Like all of our helo crew, they were EMTs, so they could give on-site treatment. But anyways, they run across a group. And it was a normal thing for the cartels would feed these guys concoctions, right? So we found out one time because a guy went haywire on us that his water bottle wasn't water. It was like a combination of water, meth, and fentanyl. And it was so that he could work through the pain, right? So as they were hiking them up, hey, take a sip of this. It amps you up with the meth, the fentanyl. You're not feeling any pain, so they could keep going and not hold the crowd behind, right? But anyways, a young lady has a bag of pills, which was normal. And we're trying to figure out, we being the air crew that was with her, trying to figure out what are these pills. So they ask her, like, hey, what kind of drugs are these? And she says, well, those are morning after pills. And they're like, well, why do you have morning after pills? And she says, well, I've taken this trip before. She goes, I got 8 to 10 times on this trip, and I don't want to get pregnant from the rapist. And she said, so I take these every time I. And dude, she said it just like that, like it was not a big deal, right? And so that was the exploitation that we were seeing on humans out there. And I'm not even talking about, what Katarina or Katarina.
Katarina.
Katarina. I screwed her name up.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Katarina. But Katarina, the what she's talking about is the harvesting and using humans for parts. This was just what they were doing to human beings that were trying to get from point A to point B, right? And how they were exploiting them.
And this is, I've been privileged to have some pretty awesome people in here from a first-person perspective who have lived down on what I'll call these wars on the border that involve the cartel and all the disgusting things they do. And in my job, I take this seriously and do the best I can with it. I'm balanced. I bring on people from both sides of the political spectrum. We cover all different stories. We do funny podcasts, totally non-political podcasts, and then there's some parts where the geopolitics comes in, and that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, objectively, I think a lot of Democrats have actually even come out and admitted this over the past year or so. The last administration's border policy was really bad.
Yeah.
And you and I are going to talk about that in more detail where you can actually give me the full firsthand experience with it. But there's no doubt about it that it was really bad. And one of the things that really drove me nuts about our political divide in 2023 and 2024 when I really started covering some of these stories was the fact that a lot of the people who maybe, for their own reasons just really didn't like Trump or didn't like, more hard right-wing policies, of course, that meant that they couldn't like anything that they did.
Yeah.
And, in the same breath, a lot of these people would talk about human rights and things like that. And yet it would really annoy me when they would ignore the brutal human right violations that happen with an open border. And it's like, okay, you want to say we're a nation of immigrants. I agree with you. I don't think I had anyone here before 1900, right? So totally agree. You want to say that therefore we should open up our arms and let every fucking person in. In a perfect world, I'd agree with you. That would be awesome.
Right.
That's not the world we live in. Right. Because by the way, when you do that and you have no policing of it, you don't know who's coming in. You don't know who they're coming in with. You don't know where the fuck they're going. And you don't know what the fuck is happening on the way there if they ever get to their destination alive.
Right.
And so many of the stories, whether it was Jorge Ventura or Kat Schultz or John Norris or Ed Calderon, so many of the stories about the insane trafficking that I have to blame our own country for too, because we got people on our end who are fucking a part of this, by the way. But like the insane trafficking that would happen to human beings and the Game of Thrones type shit that you are describing now with rape tree. I mean, that's just like, that shouldn't even compute to your consciousness in the year 2026, but here we are. When people would just blatantly ignore that to what I'll call a virtue signal, they're like, yeah, we just got to let everyone in. The cognitive dissonance there genuinely pissed me the fuck off.
Right.
And I can only imagine how much it must have pissed off a guy like you who had to go take the panties and bras off a tree like that. Yeah,
and when you're in it, the funny thing is all these politicians are, most of them, probably the majority of them, not probably, the majority of them, are completely disconnected from this problem, right? And yet they're sitting in Washington, D.C. as experts. And they're telling us how we should feel or what we should feel or how we should think because they're somehow an expert. And I was always like, I've never seen this fucking guy down here like working this problem. And again, I'm married to a Mexican. Her family, she's a first generation American. Her mom came across illegally and went back, got her citizenship and came back again. And so on the Mexican side, like I have a deep love for the Mexican people. My kids are half Mexican, for the culture, for the country. But the problem, and when we talk about, specifically when you talk about migration and stuff, you have a criminal organization that is one of the most powerful in the world that is exploiting that, right? And so that's the piece you don't have any control on. And so you can feel however you want about the border itself, but our border policies were allowing a criminal organization to thrive on people, and they were victimized, right? And so we were complicit in that, whether we want to admit it or not as a country.
Yeah. And I will say, you know, where we also have to take a hard look in the mirror as a country in D.C. is the fact that, you know, maybe we should look at how we administrate our immigration system as well. Why are we incentivizing so many people to feel like their only shot is to come here illegally?
Right.
Like that's something that's on us too, you know? And unfortunately, you know, I am cynical about it when it comes to the politicians, but like you said, they're so disconnected. Yeah. They all have steak on K Street together and then go yell at each other on CNN or Fox News, you know? Yeah. And it just feels like the people who get left behind are the rest of us, you know, the 99% that they make fight all the time over issues that we shouldn't be fighting about. But, you know, you know what another great example was? Right here in New York. Eric Adams, you had this like moderate kind of old school Democrat mayor, takes over for the worst mayor in human history, Bill de Blasio. Worst mayor I've ever seen in my life. Eric Adams was a cop. You know, he's kind of your regular deal-making politician. Right. He's funny as fuck. But, you know, he was a cop.
Right.
Like, he gets it. He's like, okay, you know what? We can't have everyone jump in the turnstiles. That's probably not a good idea. Yeah. And so he was still incentivized, though, to, you know, Sanctuary City, like, verbally, publicly.
Right.
And I would always say to people, don't listen to what this guy says, watch what he does.
Right.
Because like he would do other things behind he would talk about vegan chicken publicly and then, you know, go eat at a fucking steakhouse at night.
Yeah.
And he finally couldn't do the verbal thing in 2023 where he was like, listen, DeSantis and I think Greg Abbott, they're sending these buses up here. I don't blame them. You know, it's their problem in their state that they're seeing. And we got people taking over the fucking Roosevelt Hotel who are from gangs. We can't have this. Right. And then they indict them 2 weeks later. And it's like, yeah, that's a total coincidence. I'm sure they didn't have that one fucking ready to go. You know what I mean? That when I see shit like that, and now, you know, we got Zoran because of that. I don't know, man. Yeah. Sometimes I'm just like,
oh, you and me both, dude. Believe me, I you know, we as cops, we're down in the thick of it, right? We're in society's muck, dealing with, you know, the ugly part of society a lot of the times. And then you have these people that are in charge that just refuse to acknowledge what problems actually are. Because, dude, I don't give a shit if somebody's Democrat or Republican. It's a human being,
Fix
right?
the problem.
Yeah, and we have human problems as a society, and so we got to work through those, right? And we got to figure those out. And my job is not to fix everybody's problem. My job as a cop is just enforce the rules that are laid out for me. Like, and I've had guys that I've had discussions with where they're like, I don't agree with this law. Cool, I didn't make it, bro. Right. Legislators made that law. I'm just here to enforce it. Do I philosophically disagree with some of the laws on the book? Absolutely. But I swore an oath that I would uphold these laws and I would uphold the Constitution. And I think for us in our profession, if you have cops that focus on the Constitution first and understand that that's the guiding principle, like as we went through 2020, that was a thing that Mark and I both stood on heavily, was like, hey, Governor, cool, issue whatever fucking executive order you want. You are not the Constitution. We're going to follow that. Because we had churches saying, can we still have church? And we're like, yeah. You have a constitutional right to have church. But the governor said, fuck him. He's not the Constitution. And he's not a one man. He's not our king, right?
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah, it is. It's nuts.
Quickly.
Man, we're going down rabbit holes.
No, I love rabbit holes like this because, like, you know, you also, that's a really strange seat to sit in. You're supposed to, in the chain of command of the state, the governor's above you. You're supposed to uphold the law, which is not dictated by the governor, but they're supposed to be like the leading example of what the law is supposed to be. To that point,
Julian, that is why people need to understand this. People understand this. Your sheriff is the most important elected official that you will hire as a people, because that's where the line was drawn in the sand when 2020 happened. Was our sheriff at that time, Mark Lamb, said, no, we are not doing this, because they still have to have the law enforcers, right? So you had governors and stuff saying, this is our rule. The elected sheriffs of their counties, they have the power in their counties. So those elected sheriffs were like, no, that violates the Constitution. We are not doing that. We are not forcing people to do X, Y, and Z because that's outside of the constitutional laws. And so those sheriffs were the ones in those cases that held the line many times, and why it's one of the most important positions that people will vote for.
Did the cartels follow the COVID guidelines?
They gave two shits about COVID guidelines. They actually, and again, grew up with all Mexicans. My wife, Mexican. I have been deeply in the Mexican culture since I
believe
was a
you.
kid,
You like
right?
Mexicans.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
We're good.
Well, and just have an understanding of the culture, right? And so
the fact that you even have to preface that is embarrassing.
I'm just saying, bro.
People try to twist words.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
They do. But saying that because I think that's where I learned a lot of my resolve, quite frankly, because as a teenage kid, I worked in the fields too. So that small farming town that I went to and finished high school, our summer job was I worked in the potato fields digging potatoes with the migrants, right? So I'm hanging out with all Mexican migrants, doing the jobs that they do at that time. So why I'm telling you that is because as we went into COVID, quite frankly, like a lot of my Mexican people were like, I don't believe this shit. Like, just rub some dirt on it and keep going, man. You know, don't worry about that. And so they don't pay attention to all this rhetoric. They just go, man. And they've got some of the strongest resolve I've ever seen. So as we went through COVID, a lot of them were like, pinchy COVID, it ain't a thing.
Yeah,
it's made up shit by white people.
I mean, it's crazy how fast so many people like just adapted to what we like. Many of us did, just like adapted. Like, oh, this is what it is. We're inside now. But I don't know that will ever be able to happen again because of how they. Meaning, like, even if something came out that that objectively was like way worse than COVID, I guess a lot of us are just dying because people are like, this is fucking crazy, and righteously so. Yeah. Like, there was something about the politicians where my dad said this really early on when they were saying 2 weeks to stop the curve. I'll never forget this. He called me like 4 days into the pandemic and said, don't re-sign your lease. My lease was coming up April 1st. He said, just come down here. I was living in North Jersey. Come down here to South Jersey and ride this out. And I was like, what are you talking? They said 2 weeks to stop the curve. He goes, no. This is not going to be 2 weeks. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, they love this shit. Yeah. They love the press conferences. They love the control. Yeah. They love the power that they
all of a sudden
have.
Somebody was in charge that never gets to be in charge.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that was very revealing. about the human nature of the people who gravitate towards those
Here's
positions.
when I knew it was bullshit, dude. We hadn't even started the flattening the curve shit yet. And in my position, a lot of times I would get tasked with attending these meetings. So Mark would be like, hey, this meeting's coming up, go check it out. Okay, so we were having a meeting. This is when COVID was starting to, COVID-19 was starting to be like, oh, we don't know what this is. It's coming. There may possibly be shutdowns. We're not sure. So we're meeting with our local county health groups, right? And so the public health for the county, we're in this meeting and they're like, and so to this point, let me preface it with this. To this point, we had a plan for any outbreak. And typically, like when it was a flu-related type plan, is like it's going to run its course. We just have to manage it as best as possible, let it run its course. It'll infect people, it'll do its thing, and we'll get stronger, and then boom, we're back to normal, right? So that has been the plan. Like to that point, 25 years of cop work, that's always been the plan. This happens, and all of a sudden, public health people are like, yeah, so we might have to shut things down. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not the plan. The plan was just it runs its course, and we let it happen. And like, no, there's a new plan. We got to do this new thing. And so I asked one of my public health, I'm like, why is this? She says, we have no idea. It's getting pushed from the federal level. Like that is not the plan, but they're making it the plan. So that's when we knew like this is bullshit.
Yeah, nah, took me a little longer for sure. I mean, we were up here, I will say, when it was, because this was like the ground zero of it.
Right.
It was at the beginning, there's things you rewrite in your head with history sometimes because then you see what happens after.
Yeah.
And the one thing I have never rewritten is that, like any outbreak of some sort of virus, where it happens, like at the beginning, it was bad. Like we all knew people who were dying on respirator. They also didn't know how to treat it, but then you're like a month in and you're hearing that a lot less.
Yeah.
Which now I know the science of viruses. It's like a host starts killing shit and it's like, or it starts killing the host and it's like, let's not do this anymore because it wants to survive.
Right.
Right. This is how a virus works. So, at the time you're kind of like, yeah, but could it still come back? And then once you're in July, you're thinking to yourself, I see we're going to barbecues. Like, shit's fine. Like, what the fuck? Why are they still telling these masks? And
well, dude, and I know I'll catch some hate because anytime you talk about that time period, it gets very divided too. But I've had people tell me, well, you don't know, you didn't lose anybody. Yeah, I did. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law both died within 5 days of each other. Oof. And so we had back-to-back funerals, and we didn't get to see neither one of them because the fucking hospital wouldn't let us in as a family because of the COVID rules, right? God. So my mother-in-law and brother-in-law both sat in a hospital bed and died by themselves. My mother-in-law, we got lucky because my pastor called the hospital director who he knew, and he said, can Matt's daughter, who's a nurse, at least go in? And he's like, yeah. So my daughter got to go in, FaceTime the family for my mother-in-law's last breath.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's the other thing we don't talk about enough from that period, what the separation and the shit it did to families when people died, whether from COVID or not. They can't even, then they can't have a proper funeral. Like, how did you guys even do that at the time?
Well, because it was mother-in-law, brother-in-law. We had one funeral home, and luckily, this was 21 actually when this happened. So it was already January of 21. This time frame actually, almost 5 years almost to the day. And so the funeral home by that time had kind of softened up the rules. And so we were able to gather with masks, right? But by that time, the with mask part was like you have to come in with a mask. What you do after that, we're not worried about. So everybody had to wear a mask in, and then once you get inside, do whatever you want. So it was, yeah.
It's wild that once things had gotten that far into it and we were doing things like that so clearly performatively, there was a massive part of the population, and it was literally the majority at the time, like I'll say 80% of us, just went along with it.
Yeah.
Like it's weird for me to talk about because I was kind of separated from the world. I was building the podcast in my parents' house at the time, back in the woods. People would come to see me to do this. I was never going out. Like, I didn't experience all this stuff. I was literally, unless I went to I wasn't even picking people up at the airport at the time. But unless I went to like fucking, thanks for the sound effects, fellas.
Yeah, they're getting after it over
Christ, there. Bro. It's never ending. I'm sorry. It just really pisses me off. It's never ending. But, you know, maybe I'd go to Wawa or something like that, but very, very little outside. And then, you know, I would talk to my friends who were living through it, and I'm like, you guys did what? Like, yeah, dude. It's just, it still does not compute for me. I don't know that, like, I'm trying to think if I had been in an office scenario or something, if that was even a thing, like, at that time, like, how I would have handled that. But there would have been a breaking point. Like,
yeah. Well, for us, there's no stopping, right? Like, what are you going to do as a cop? You have to still go. People still fighting. People still getting robbed. People still having especially domestic violence during that time, right? Because now all of a sudden, people have to figure out, do I really love my spouse? Because you're spending a whole lot of time with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine the downstream effects of it from a crime perspective were insane. But we had been talking about, I think when you brought up like the tree where you would see all this horrible shit, you were even talking about back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Seeing this. So, you know, I guess a moment like that, when you realize something like that exists, you start to realize, it starts to hit home that like, oh, this is way bigger than drugs and money. This is a disgusting culture that is 55 miles away, unfortunately, that this can't be here in this country.
Right. Well, and so again, diving into the Mexican culture a little bit, culturally, what I experienced as a kid compared to the Mexican culture of the mid 2000s forward, completely different in the sense that still, you know, when you look at a typical Mexican family in Mexico, still a very just tight-knit family, a lot of stuff done together. But the cartels have started, at that point, they, over time, had bastardized religion and inserted themselves there, right? And so you had a lot of the Santa Muerte stuff was starting to come into play, and a lot of that...
The Santa Muerte stuff?
So Santa Muerte, you familiar with? Or Ed was on here, right?
Yeah.
Calderon?
I'm trying to remember.
Santa Muerte is essentially... it kind of derived from Saint Death, which is, you know, an actual thing in the Catholic religion. But Santa Muerte is almost like a cult of its own now, right? So there we go. Yeah,
Santa Muerte.
Yeah.
Often shortened, Our Lady of Holy Death, often shortened to Santa Muerte, is a new religious movement, female deity, folk Catholic saint, and folk saint in Mexican folk Catholicism and neo-paganism, a personification of death. She is associated with healing, protection, and safe delivery to the afterlife by her devotees. Despite condemnation by the Roman Catholic Church and evangelical Protestant denominations, her following has become increasingly prominent during the 21st century.
Right.
Santa Muerte almost always appears as a female skeletal figure, clad in a long robe and holding one or more objects, using a scythe and a globe. Her robe can be of any color or pattern, as more specific images to the figure vary widely from devotee to devotee, and according to the ritual being performed or the petition being made. Her present-day following was first reported in Mexico by American anthropologists in the 1940s and was an occult practice until the early 2000s. Most prayers and other rituals have been traditionally performed privately at home. Since the beginning of the 21st century, worship has become more public, starting in Mexico City, after a believer named Enriqueta Romero founded her famous Mexico City shrine in 2001. The number of believers in Santa Muerte has grown over the past 2 decades to an estimated 12 million followers, who are concentrated in Mexico, Central America, and the United States, with a smaller contingent of followers in South America, Canada, and Europe. Santa Muerte has 2 similar male counterparts in Latin America, the skeletal folk saints San La Muerte of Argentina and Paraguay, and Rey Pascual of Guatemala and Chiapas, Mexico. According to R. Andrew Chestnut, Ph.D. in Latin American history and professor of religious studies, Santa Muerte is the center of the single fastest growing new religious movement in the Americas. Ed was here last March. We did 2 episodes. He was here for like 6 hours.
Right.
The occult and some of the religious movements are the one thing like we literally didn't get to, and he's going to come back later this year, so I'm sure we'll talk about it. But I'm a lot less familiar with this.
Yeah. So and so for us, this is the thing, right? This is especially, and even in the book, I address some of this and go into some of the cartel's cult a little bit. and their religious beliefs, which is essentially they've taken the Catholic religion and kind of bastardized some of those beliefs into what it is. And Ed, I mean, Ed being Ed, and we've never met, but I know who he is, and I know how well versed he is in all of this stuff, and I'm sure he'll know way more than I do on this, because I know it from the law enforcement perspective dealing with these guys. But what I saw on the ground is, as this started becoming a thing in the early 2000s, and then even stronger in the mid 2000s moving forward, is the behavior of the cartels and the people in the cartels and those organizations started changing. And so they started caring less about humanity, because there was always like this in the early days, 90s and early 2000s, there were always lines you didn't cross, right? There were still these weird rules, no women, no children get hurt, right? You follow certain rules even as a male. And there were occasions where guys would go out of bounds with that, and the cartel would deal with them like, hey, we still have lines that we operate within, right? And when you operate outside of those, you cause problems. So that started to change as we hit the mid-2000s forward, where they started to disregard humans more and more and more, and they started to get into this occult stuff, Santa Muerte being one of them, where they would basically pray to Santa Muerte, like, kill my enemies, let me get my loads of drugs through, give me as much money and power as possible. So these are the things they're praying for to this Santa Muerte. And then there's Jesus Malverde as a second one that I write about in there, because those are the two that are most prominent with us when we dealt with them. And so you would see shrines of this stuff. So some of the houses we would hit, they would have a whole area dedicated to big, tall statues, candles lit everywhere, and looked very much like Santeria, and that's Jesus Malverde there. In Malverde, they would have the same thing. So they consider him like the Mexican Robin Hood, stole from the rich, gave to the poor kind of guy. But he became another one that is essentially what we call a narco saint.
Yeah, can you go back to the first one you clicked, Joe? Yeah, he's got the fucking
crossed AKs. Yeah, I mean, come on. What saint doesn't have an AK?
The bullets around his halo.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Someone's album cover.
Oh, my God. Did you ever, whether it was after you caught them and you're interrogating them or in some, whatever capacity it was, have you ever sat with a cartel guy who believed in this and, like, I don't know, asked him if he realized, if it ever occurred to him that everything he was asking these quote unquote saintly figures for was objectively like evil?
So no, to that particular question, but when I was working undercover, we would go to some of these stores to get some of this stuff, right? Because it's paraphernalia to have to legitimize when you're doing undercover work, right? So if you had the candles, if you had some of the gear they're wearing, some of that stuff, right? And I was kind of fascinated by this stuff. So funny story, I'm one of those dudes that just, I want to dive in and learn more, right? And so I was learning more about this stuff. And so they have these things called yebarias, and a yebaria is like an herb store, right? But it's more. And so these yebarias, we have them all over the place in Arizona. Again, having a Mexican wife, I tell her one day, I said, hey, we're going to stop in this yerberia. I'm going to get some stuff. And she's like, what could you possibly want in there? Because one thing about her family is her family on the Mexico side, and even her mom was what we call a curandera. And so what that is essentially a healer, right? And so, yeah, there's a yerberia there. He's got them pulled up. So these stores you can go to and kind of get these supplies, right? And so if you ever go here, it's like a cartel religious supply house. And so it has all the candles you want. Like I have at my office a Contra la Ley. So that's a keep the law away from me candle. So you light that one when you don't want the cops coming around. It has a I'm rubber, you're glue. What comes at me bounces off me and sticks to you. It has one. They have one of those candles. I mean, they got candles and oils for everything, dude. And so tell my wife, I said, hey, well, I want to go get a couple of these candles and a couple of Malverde things that I'm looking for. And so she's like, all right, she's pregnant with my son at the time. And again, so her mom's what's called a curandera, which is a healer. And so her mom would do things based on the Bible mostly. Like she would clean our house on occasion, and what that consisted of, she would come in and she'd say, hey, I need to clean your house, everybody out, open all the windows. And she would walk through and she would pray throughout our house, and she would do sage, and she would do a couple other kind of ritualistic things almost to bring in the good and get rid of the bad. And so understanding that world a little bit and being kind of connected to that, the curanderas are on essentially, I think, like most Americans will relate it to a white witch, a black witch, so good witch, bad witch. And so her mom being a healer, on the flip side of that, there's evil ones, right? And they practice a lot of the cult stuff. And so my wife and I walk in, she's pregnant with my son. We clear the doorway and she stops and she's like, oh. And I said, what's going on? She's like, oh my God. She said, it was my boy, but the boy is really kicking as soon as I walked in this store. And so we're in there a couple minutes walking around, and she's like, I got to get out of here. She said, this place is evil. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we just walked in, I'm just looking around, and she's like, I can feel the evil in here. I'm getting out of here. And she's like, I'm gone. So she bounces. I stay in there. I get the contra la ley candle. I'm like, hey, dude, can I get that contra la ley? And he's like, yeah. So he sets it down. I'm looking at some other stuff. Let me make sure it does this. It's on a counter. It goes boom, off the edge, right? Breaks. And the dude is kind of over there, and I'm over here, and I look up at him, and he says, it does not want to go with you. And I was like, that's weird. So I'm like, wow, sorry, dude. And he's like, oh, I'll get you another one. So he gets me another one and puts it up there. All of that to say, when I would do that stuff, my wife always insisted, like, you're tempting fate when you go in these stores, because in her mind, her upbringing and her mom being who she was, insisted that, like the Santa Muerte stuff, all that, the kind of cultish stuff was evil. And as you can see, the cartels tying that all back in, that's exactly what they use it for, right? They're praying for evil things, and they're praying to these people. So the cult thing is fascinating as well in their world. And I saw that change over time.
Do you think most of them have a self-awareness subconsciously that they're praying for the evil things, or that they're so far gone that they've actually made themselves believe that this is right?
That's tough, dude. I think there's probably a little bit of both, right? I think that when they're in it, when they're in that life, that they just ignore it and they suppress what they know would bring them back to humanity. But when it's all good. When they're doing what they do, he knows what I'm talking about. So he's like, get him off the line, get him off the line.
That's right.
But they don't want to, I don't think you can. If you're in that realm, you're operating in such an evil environment that if you focus on the good, it can pull you out of what you're doing in a bad way, right? It can take them off point. So I've got to be on point or else I get killed, because I don't know if people know this, but like the cartels, they don't have like a formal discipline. Like you don't go to HR if you screw up and get a write-up or anything. They beat the shit out of you or they kill you, right? And so everybody who's working under that organization is very motivated to do whatever job the boss wants to do. And so I think they get lost in that world. I think everybody has a piece of humanity still deep down in there, even when they go completely evil.
That's the really strange thing. You know, I've had guys in here who have spent time undercover with the cartels like you, and, you know, in the roles where they're in it for years, and they become friends with these guys, and it's not real, but then it feels real. Yeah. And they're like, you know, you'll go when they're off the clock. You'll go to their house to have dinner, and they're a father. They love their daughter. Yeah. You know, they watch the game with you. They talk with you like a normal person without talking business. Right. And then you get in the car and you go somewhere and they slice somebody's face with a fucking carrot peeler. Right. And you're like, how did it get from there? Because it's a switch. Yeah. And I think honestly, dude, again, growing up with Mexicans, I think it's a cultural thing, right? That they are very mission oriented, and they understand their mission, and they understand that they are, in their mind, they're fighting for their family. So
I came up as a nothing, and I'm never going to let my family be a nothing. And so that's what I'm fighting for, even though I'm doing. And you talk to some of these higher level guys, and they're like, who says it's wrong? Like the gabachos in the U.S. are the ones that say it's wrong. But this is how we have to live down here. And they swear by, that's the way we have to do things. But I 100% agree with you. And I saw that, dude. I told you I dated a girl. It was my freshman year. And her and I were seeing each other. Her dad was a super nice guy when I met him. It was weird that there were two other guys always with him that had guns. But and honestly, looking back, I was like, oh, yeah, it was obvious. But at the time, I was focused on her, not them. But when he got killed, all of a sudden, she inherited bodyguards. And I was like, why are these dudes always with us? And she goes, oh, those are my dad's bodyguards, and now they're with me. And I was like, what exactly did your dad do? And she kind of explained, he was a high level guy. And I was like, yeah, but yeah, anyways.
Let me see it from their perspective for 1 second.
Okay.
You grew up with nothing. Some people in Mexico, some people take care of you, and your job is to take these things you grow as plants, or, this coke you bring in, and you get it from point A to point B, and that's how you pay the bills. You and I know that causes a lot of problems, but on the grand scheme of things that they end up getting to, that's the bottom half of it, right, so to speak. I don't understand the whole fighting for my family thing. I don't understand how you can still operate that way when it gets to fentanyl, which is just dead on arrival.
Right.
Or, God forbid, it gets to the insane trafficking stuff that we've already talked about. I don't buy it. I think you have to be a full-blown sociopath. I don't think it's cultural at that point. Where I will say it's environmental is that they get to a lot of these kids when they're fucking 10 and put guns in their hands and show them dead people and get them used to it so that they are desensitized to it, and then that kid grows up to be a sociopath. But the whole, we're just mission oriented, and then that mission turns into raping women and shit. Fuck you. Fuck you. No, you're not.
No, and so I think more where I was going with that was just like we talked about one of your other guests, right? That belonged to an organization where he was like, this is how I ran things. Yeah, you'd have your guys doing that and you that. And so I think it's the same thing for the cartels, right? And am I excusing the top level guys? No, because I do think there are a lot of sociopaths just by the way that they behave. But they are removed from a lot of that stuff too, right? So when they reach those levels, and they all came up at different time frames having to do different stuff to get to where they're at, but they're at the top now. And am I the one necessarily raping a girl or cutting someone's heads off or skinning them alive? No, I'm giving those orders. And so by proxy, am I doing it? Yes. But am I the one actually doing it? So I think having that removal allows them to consciously divide it. You know what I mean? Have that life and this life, because they can say like, well, this is who I really am. This is just who I have to be, right? To justify it in their mind or to be able to operate like they do. Because same thing, dude. I've had the best way to describe it is green zones in my wife's side of the family, where we go to a barbecue and I'm sitting with those dudes because they're part of the family on that side, right? They're the bad guy. Yeah, and you're in a green zone because it's a family get-together. So when it's a family get-together, all bets are off. Like you're not a cartel dude. I'm not a cop right now. We are family. We're going to have a family function. We're not going to cross any lines. But then when we leave here, all bets are off and it's back to normal shit. So there's all these weird little nuances like that I think allow them to flip in and out of, much like undercover work, dude. Yes. I would be an undercover guy and I would be operating in one world. So over here, I'm dealing with a dude and we're talking about how much meth I can buy from him. And then hours later, I'm with my daughter at a dance recital, watching her do that.
It's a strange to have to go from one to the other like that. Yep. You talked about earlier some of the extremely obvious like PTSD things where your friends died and you saw it and things like that. But, the residual effects of doing something like that over and over again going in and out of that rush or whatever that is, and then having to be like normal American dad at home, that's got to take a toll.
It does, yeah. That I think it's because the hypervigilance, right, of always being switched on. And it was apparent to me, I was not doing undercover work anymore, but I was still, I think you always are. Once you do this job, you see the world in a different way. And I'm outside one day with my son playing catch, and a car pulls up and a dude gets out that I don't know. I don't recognize him. I don't recognize the car. He gets out and he stops and he looks around. So just his behavior kind of caught my eye because he was close to my house, somebody I didn't know. He gets out like he doesn't know where he's at. He's looking for something. And he looks over at me and he's like, "Do you live here?" And I'm thinking, fuck, I don't have my gun. I don't have any cover. My son's closer to him than I am. And I'm trying to figure out quickly, like, how can I get my son cover? How can I get a tactical advantage here? I'm going through this whole slew of thoughts, right? And as I'm doing that, he's like, "Do you live here?" And he's walking closer. So now like it's pressing my time down and I'm going into emergency action plan. So I start moving towards my son and I'm telling him, "Get behind the car, dude." My son's like, "What's going on, Dad?" And so all of that's playing out. And then the dude pulls out keys and he's like, "I found these keys in the mailbox. They go to this address." And I'm like, Jesus Christ. All right. That was not even close to what I thought was about to happen. And so, yeah, that kind of wears on you a little bit, as you go through life.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.